fold this in, get rid of this white. This is all bad stuff. It's all problematic. Got to hide all this. Let's see. Kind of uncomfortable, but at least it looks better. It's much happier now. The camera's much happier, but we're live. It is 7:29. A little bit late tonight. After going through and looking at all the comments and emails and all that stuff, I want to talk about average power production because seems to be some confusion about that. I remember recently watching somebody on one of those social media things took the testing that I did, some of the results from the testing that I did way back for the hot rod story, where I tested all the intake manifolds and I'm like, yeah, this one made this much power and this one made this much power. I don't even know if they included horsepower and torque. I can't remember in their discussion, but they're just reading about they were just taking the information that I did and then making a video on it, which I guess that's legal. But the thing that bothered me the most is that now I know they have to do this because there's not very much time for Instagram or whatever they're posting it on, but they're posting it and they're talking about, oh, well, this intake manifold made 421 horsepower. They're giving peak numbers. I'm like, that's not the story. That's why I include graphs and all this stuff, and why I show, like, the thumbnail that I'm showing is the LS2 intake manifold. So when we compare all these intake manifolds, you might have two of them that have all but identical peak power numbers. So if we look at the peak power numbers given by the fast manifold and the Holley high ram, tested on that 6-liter, they're within 1 or 2 horsepower of each other. They're the same. I mean, you could get that sort of variation maybe from the way that you're doing the testing or whatever. And 1 or 2 horsepower, when you're talking about near 600, is not something that you would be able to discern from behind the wheel, because more than likely you accelerating your car 3 or 4 times, you're going to have a variation of more power than that in these different times that you try to accelerate your car. Most cars are not, you run them on a chassis dyno or out of the track road, they're not repeatable within 1 or 2 horsepower the way that we try to get them, or we can get them on the engine dyno. They just don't do that. We know from running lots of stuff on the engine dyno that it's, especially if you're running a factory computer, that it can play with things a lot, and you don't get that sort of repeatability. So you don't actually get that. So you can't tell the difference between 1 or 2 horsepower, nor could you feel it. And 1 or 2 horsepower out of 600, you probably wouldn't be able to tell that on a watch either. It's not going to change ET or mile an hour, really. Not nearly as much as the other things, or temperature of the day and the traction and how the transmission's working and all that stuff. But if you compare those two, the fast intake manifold and the Holley high ram, they're decidedly different manifolds, which mean different designs, different runner lengths, different designs. The one's a tongue ram, one's a cross ram-ish kind of thing. Wildly different runner lengths, and the gist of all this is they're wildly different power curves. So even though they make within a couple of horsepower at the horsepower peak, they make peak horsepower at a different engine speed. And then, more importantly for this discussion, they make a wildly different power curve below that peak number, and then also after that peak number, because the fast would fall off faster than the high ram would, because the high ram's a shorter runner manifold. And so it continues to hold power depending on what your valve train will cooperate and do, because that motor had good cylinder heads. It had airflow research heads on it, had good springs on it, had a good camshaft in it. And so it would continue to hold that power out when we put these shorter runner intake manifolds on there. The fast manifold, though, and any of those long runner manifolds, the Trailblazer SS, the factory LS2, the LS1, LS6, all those things, they, just like the fast, because they're longer runner, they have a much more average power production through all the rest of the curve below the horsepower peak. So if you go backward, okay, they're the same at the horsepower peak, but if you go back down, the difference between those manifolds gets great. So you may have 30 or 40 foot-pounds of torque difference between those manifolds at various spots along the RPM curve. And the thing is that you have a good, sizable, noticeable from behind the wheel, because the biggest difference is going to be down low. That's where you get on the throttle. That's what brings smiles to your face and pushes you back in your seat and presses the person that you're trying to take for a ride or whatever, press with your hot rod. They'll notice it down there. They're not going to notice a difference up at the top. I mean, you may be scaring them already because you're going 100 plus miles an hour. They're just scared because of the speed. But the 6,500 or 7,000 RPM number doesn't impress them nearly as much as the 3,000 or whatever your stall converter is, 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 RPM, whatever that number is, because that feels better. That's where the big torque difference is of these kinds of manifolds. So we're talking just about manifolds. We can talk about anything. We can talk about different kinds of boosts and different displacements, different cylinder heads, I guess, a little bit. But boost response converters, you can talk about a lot of different things that will show that sort of differential down low and improve the acceleration. But the average power production, like if you were, one of the things that I really liked is back in the olden days, I don't know if the new Dyno jets still do this, but Dyno jet, when they first started, was just an inertia dyno. They didn't have the ability to load it back then. They didn't sell them that way. But one of the cool things that they did, so you'd make a run and go from wherever you wanted to hit the throttle at, you could do it at off idle, like guys like to talk about, or 1,000 RPM or 2,000 RPM, and run it out to wherever past the power peak, and it would show you what the power curve was. Well, the cool thing that it would do also is it would show you this little drag race run of your thing in that gear versus another car in that gear and the power curve that it made. So it could, in a sense, show you, and this is, it's not really a drag race because it's not a quarter mile, it's not an eighth. It doesn't take into account traction. It doesn't take into account 60-foot times. It doesn't do any of that. But it shows you essentially what would happen, what you could expect to happen from like a head-to-head roll-on race of those two things. And so you could see where one of them that has more average power does better, even if the other one were, say, to make more peak power on the top. The one that usually has all the low speed power pulls out ahead, and the other one, even though it has more power on the top, almost never catches that one. It's really hard to make up that ground from from the power gains that it has. Now, this is another consideration in drag racing, though. So when we see this thing and running from, let's say 3,000 to 6,500 RPM or 3,000 to 7,000 RPM, or wherever you want to start and run it from, it only does that in first gear if you're at the drag strip. So if you're doing an 1/8 mile, it would be actually more important, that low speed power would be more important than it would be in a quarter mile race. And the reason for that is if you're running it in the 1/8, that time that it's spent accelerating in first gear, assuming that you have the traction and you're not just spinning the tires, the time that it spends in first gear relative to the total time that it spends on the track is greater in an 1/8 mile because the percentage is greater, because you're not spending as much time in the other gears because it ends at the 1/8 mile. But in the quarter, you're going to keep running past the 1/8 and be in the higher gears for a longer period of time. And what happens in the higher gears is it doesn't drop back down to 3,000 RPM or whatever your launch RPM was when you're launching it. Let's say you stall it. Let's say you got a 2,500 RPM converter, you nail the throttle, you take off, and the thing takes off and runs from 2,500, shifts at, let's say it shifts at 7,000 RPM and drops back down to 5 or 45 or whatever your gear splits are, depending on whether it's a good transmission or a factory transmission. Some of the gear splits are really tall, but you may drop a couple thousand RPM, but you're never going to drop it all the way down to 2,500. So you're never using those gains. You're only using those once in that first gear. And in the quarter of a mile, all the rest of the things are now going to be, okay, what's the difference in power from, like, let's say 4,800 or 5,000 to 7,000. Let's say you're shifting at 7 and it drops back down to 5 or thereabouts. So now what is the power difference between these two things that we're comparing, two different intake manifolds, for instance? Now what is the difference there? Maybe in our comparison with the fast manifold and the high ram, maybe from 5,000 to 7,000, maybe the difference isn't going to be as great. I mean, I know that that's the case because I have all the dyno testing to show that, because we know out at 7,000, they're roughly the same. And beyond that, the the higher end probably is a little bit better. So maybe you could run more RPM. But if you just ran it there, the difference now, the acceleration difference in these higher gears where it's only running from 5,000 to 7,000 isn't going to be, you know, as more beneficial as it is down low in favor of the fast manifold, in favor of the long runner manifold. So when you're running in the quarter mile, maybe the shorter runner manifold might ultimately do better, but it would only do better if it does better in terms of power. So when you're choosing that, you have to think about that stuff. But then the other thing that a lot of times people don't think about, like, and in this case, they're both the same. I picked these two, probably was not a good choice. Maybe I should have picked one that made more peak power on the short runner one, but made less, but made less down low. You know, the typical kind of long runner, short runner thing. We picked that single plane, dual plane kind of thing. So we picked that sort of combination. Even if that was the case, and one of them does better in the quarter mile, even if that happened. The other thing that a lot of people don't think about is, okay, that this isn't just a dedicated drag race car. The reason that you want more average power production and even favoring, you know, leaning more toward the low speed side of things is that when you're driving around, you're using way more of that than you ever are the 7,000 RPM thing. So that's why average power production is for one thing, average power production determines what the acceleration rate is. Now, as I just showed you, even at a drag strip, the average power production, we're looking at different average power productions in the different gears, depending on the split. In first gear, we're going from 2,500 or whatever a launch RPM is to our shift point. In the taller gears, we're going from whatever it drops down to up to the shift point. And so in the different gears, we're looking at different average power productions. But if you can improve average power production, it's way more important than doing that for acceleration than it is just getting a peak number, which is why when I was looking at the thing, it just drove me nuts. Oh yeah, this one made 428. Great. That tells us nothing. That's why Richard does this dyno testing, shows you different curves. So you can go, oh yeah, that's great. This one made 10 more at the top, but this one made 30 down low. So I'm definitely going with the 30 because I'm going to be using that 90% of the time while I'm driving. And also, oh yeah, when we go do accelerate, I'm going to like launch this guy by 2 lengths or whatever. And then he has to run me down. And he's not going to be able to run me down in the 8th. Might be able to run me down in the quarter because he's making more peak power. But I'm still going to have more fun, you know, driving around. And that's my that's my case. Get lots of average power production, and even if it's a street strip car, favorite like torque peak and below than torque peak and above. If it's a race car, torque peak and above is what you're going to look at. There. Would you rather have more power below torque peak than above torque peak? There. Good evening. Average power for street cars. Evening. Would 60-1 turbo still be efficient on a K series? Yeah, that's a pretty old design though. Yeah, there are lots better choices than that. 20 average because burnouts and ice cream. Yeah. If I don't catch any live shows before Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. Track last night. Okay, I'm cool. All right, blue collar hit us with it. No new personal best. Still clicks off 12s. Junkyard LQ4, 862s, Chopacabra, Trailblazer SS. All that's good stuff. 456s, 3800 stall. A 3800 stall with a Chopacabra. That's a lot. Makes sense to have everything up top. Man, if I had a 3800 stall, I'd be real tempted to put more camshaft in it than that. And 456s, I think so. I think you could get something going on there. You ever heard of anybody using MFI fuel injection and boost with the Ford FE? If so, I'm curious how it went. Building 360 boosting. Yeah, you can run fuel injection with any motor. The only thing that you have to get is you'll have to obviously either do a manifold. Now you can run a carbureted manifold with like a 4-hole throttle body, or you could do port injection. But in that case, you're probably going to have to drill and tap that. I don't ever remember seeing something that was already done, because I don't know how big the EFI FE market is for boost. It's a good idea, but you also, like I said, could use the 4-hole throttle body and just put it on any kind of sidewinder or high riser or medium riser, whatever, any kind of factory intake manifold, and certainly the Edelbrocks and Shelbys and other things that might be out there. My International made 428 at 2200, but it only goes to 4200. There you go. 2200 to 4200. That's perfect. It's not about average power production, but I love putting gears into a car because it makes it driving really fun around town and pressing people in the passenger seat. Well, that multiplies the available power if you put gears in it. I see everything up top. If you're cruising, your vehicle won't get around. You got other problems. I'm not sure I understand that. 5.3, 10 to 1, 229, 242 cam, 1200 turbo, a decent setup. Yes. What kind of RPM are you wanting to run? I think I would go with a smaller cam than that. And a 630 lift cam is going to be kind of hard on valve train. Just tell me how much power you want to make. I mean, you could go with like our 212 cam, you could go way over 1,000 horsepower and have much better response rate and stuff. But that will work. That will work because what they say about every cam. You know what they say. $750 to $800. Yeah, you're way over cammed in my opinion. You're just going to make it softer. I don't know what intake and manifold and stuff that you have on that. How much does cam duration change power gain in a cam swap? Do you mean as an individual thing? Are you only changing cam duration? A cam swap can be worth a lot. And when you're doing a cam swap, you're changing cam duration, but you're also changing the valve events that help add or subtract power. More average power throughout the RPM range, but what if it redlines at 5,000 RPM versus 7,500? That's fine. I mean, what is it? Depends on what you're trying to do. Your effective RPM range would be chosen based on the thing that you're trying to get done with the motor. This seems more like a race question than what the regular guide do. The poll question does. The poll question seems exactly like what the question a street guy should be answering. Just realized in my adult life I'll never be a professional drag racer. That's okay. But love a street car weekend warrior. Rather have a fun car with a broad power band and just chasing peak power. I think the only time you chase peak power is when you're doing racing NA builds. Even when we did Engine Masters, when I competed in that, the whole thing was about average power production because we had to run from 2,500 to 6,500 or something like that with the given displacement and within the given rule set and stuff. And then they took average horsepower and average torque, which I thought was a good thing. Even at that, those motors were really just built for that competition. I think that the original thought was if we do this and have them make lots of this average power, that's going to represent being a street motor, but not one of those motors was a street motor. At least none of the top finishers were. Realizing, let's see, Holly 2-piece race single plane. Okay. Yeah, that's going to be with that cam and that intake manifold, that's going to be soft down low. With that turbo and that cam and that intake, that will be kind of soft down low. I don't know if you have a stall converter or what the deal is, but um, I like making lots of power. So if you want to make 1,000 horsepower, what I do then is go, okay, I like 1,000 horsepower is the number. That's good. I can make that. The turbo, the G42 will easily do that. Now, what can I do to improve all of the stuff below 1,000 horsepower? Can I get more low speed power? Small cam. Can I get more low speed power? Long runner intake manifold. Still doing the 1,000 horsepower. Can I do this inexpensively? Some sort of stock head of 706, 862, 317, 243, 799. Aftermarket heads are better, but still in this range, you can do all that. And then, it's always, can I do that with the stuff that I have? And in a junkyard motor, the answer is yes. You could just get the junkyard motor, upgrade the cam and springs, the injectors, ring gap. I use head studs and then I put the turbo on to do a cam swap, put a small cam in, low buck truck camshaft, truck Norris, chopper, that kind of, all of those kinds of things are good. And then because of the problem is a lot of people think that on the individual components, like the camshaft, I need a big cam to make 1,000 horsepower. You don't. You just need a little cam to do that. I need a big intake manifold to make 1,000 horsepower. You don't. The truck manifold works fine for 1,000 horsepower. Trailblazer SS, you could do it you could also do it with that. Most of the aftermarket ones, your single plane will do that. It's just that when it does that, unless you want to run lots of RPM also, which there's a benefit to that for drag racing. But for street driving, like we have in the Tahoe with Jimmy's Tahoe, I think it has a Trailblazer SS on it now. He might have put the truck manifold back on it. Has a truck plus cam shaft in it. The low buck truck is what I would put in there if I was driving around. It has a 3584 on it, which is like immediately responsive. So it's just, whatever you want to do. When will PC Hammer LS Droid Holly X-Air offer dual injectors on? You want them to run dual injectors and you want them to do it cheaply? Have a Trailblazer SS. A Trailblazer SS and a low buck truck camshaft would be a really good way to go. Drag racing 5,000 versus 7,500 and having to shift earlier will lose you power multiplication to the tires. Yeah, we talked about that. We talked all about drag racing. A BTR stage 1 NSR cam, 208, 209. Want to get the same gains I see you get with the truck Norris NSR cam. The main difference is the duration. The torque cam, or are you talking about the truck Norris NSR cam? The truck Norris NSR cam is going to make more power than that cam does. That's going to be like a bigger version of a torque cam, but their new cams, I don't know if that's a new generation, are supposed to be better. So that will be between the torque cam and the truck Norris. 4,000 feet. I have a 4,100 stall. Why would the altitude make it stall more? I would think you would be making less power at altitude, and so that the stall would be less. But I am not a converter expert. So low buck builds can surprise. Well, we can make, you can take which we already have, you can take a 5.3 with the low buck truck cam or the truck plus cam and put a G42 turbo on it and you could max that turbo out, which the turbo will make 1,200. So it's not, the camshaft doesn't decide that. The turbo decides that. Transmissions like 7R or 4, how do you keep them from gearing down on the dyno? You mean dropping a gear? The ones that are computer controlled, you can make them stay in gear, but a manual, non-computer controlled overdrive automatic, it might not do that. You should be able to manually put it in a gear though. Richard, what do you consider the power band? Would it be the power between peak torque and peak horsepower? And do you consider a large power band? The power band, we talked about that earlier. The power band is for acceleration, is whatever part of the RPM range you're using in acceleration. In a drag race, like we talked about earlier, the power band in first gear goes from whatever the stall speed or the launch speed is to the shift point. After you get out of first gear, the power band then becomes much narrower because you go to your shift point and it only drops down to an RPM range dictated by whatever your drop is in that gear split. So when you go from first to second, whatever that RPM drop is based on the changing gearing, now you're not running from 2,500 to 7,000. You're running from 5,000 to 7,000, let's say, just as an example, if that's what your gear split is. So then in the different gears, your power band, your effective RPM range is going to be different. But driving around, your RPM range is from, from whatever your cruise RPM is to whatever your red line is. You could use all of that while you're driving around. And so that becomes effective. If you're just talking, well, and we just went over the drag race thing. Getting ready to start up my low buck truck cam springs. Very good. Thought that I saw another question that I wanted to answer, but it wasn't there. Getting ready to start up my low buck truck. Okay, we got that. I just stayed 4,000 altitude due to spool time, less air up there in Montana. My boss had two identical Chevy 3500s, one Duramax, one 8100. Seemed much easier to pass with the 8100. While they both haul comfortably, could there be effect of the higher RPM range? Yeah, if you went to pass somebody and it dropped down a gear and you were running in more RPM, it could be that I don't know what the horsepower number is for the Duramax relative to the 8100 and the corresponding torque number wherever that RPM happens at. But that might be a gearing and RPM thing. Want to do the cookie cutter 88 RX-7 with the 5.3. I guess an Astrovan trans will work. Got some FIAC 1650s. Gonna drill out the intake for the injector. Use it. I'm using 83 millimeter drive-by-wire throttle body. The cheap DNA. Gonna put on initially just for humor's sake. I just wonder if you've ever heard of anyone had success with boosting an FE. It's most likely a build from curiosity's sake. I've seen blowers on FEs. I don't remember seeing a turbo one, but I'm sure that that's been done. I'm loving the RHP 800 and the boost. However, I'm switching up my next build and going for an NA build, picking up a $100 4.8 liter long block. What RHP cam is best? What kind of power are you trying to make, and what are you doing with it? And if you're doing an NA one, why are you starting with a 4.8? You need to start with something bigger. But I mean, 4.8s are definitely cool. It just, makes more power if it's a 5.3 or 6.0. The 4.8 should get the boost, but it still works. I want to do an NA 4.8. I want to build like a 500 horsepower one. A 500 horse stock bottom end one would be cool. Thompson, where are you in Asia? Peak power numbers are good, but I'll ask if I run a lot more RPM and adjust my gearing accordingly. Is that worth it? For what is it you're trying to do? You can't just run more RPM. If you make peak power at 5,500, trying to run 8,000 RPM is not the right way to go. if you want to shift past the horsepower peak so that when you drop back down into the next gear, well, you're going up, like going from second, third, you shift past the horsepower peak so that when it drops back down, it's going to drop before the horsepower peak. But then the average of that is going to be really good. To crash the top secret Supra on Saturday. What's a top secret Supra? Tonight's question depends on what my intention is for the application. Yep, I agree. Is running 673 in the 402 meter. So that's a little more than a quarter mile. 351, 10-to-1 compression, 185s, Holly high ram, shooting for 400 to 500. Well, 400 horsepower is a lot different than 500 horsepower. But a 232, 240 cam, be a good cam. You should easily make 400 with that. I don't know if you get to 500 with that. Do you have a stock bottom end on that? Oh, well, 10-to-1 compression, you don't have a stock bottom end. So you have valve release for a cam like that. You should put it in there. I don't think it gets you to 500. I think it gets you less than that. Unless the high ram is doing a lot more than I think. For $100, yeah, that's a good deal. Looking toward the budget bill with whatever power I can get out of it for the cheapest amount possible. RHP products are budget friendly. That's why we're doing them. So everybody go. We have a Black Friday sale going on right now. And make sure you go there, get some stuff. Jimmy's throwing some t-shirts in there. We got stuff on sale. We got turbos and wave skates and cams and springs and injectors. Oh my, all that stuff. So, and I might be doing some stuff coming up here with some other YouTube / I don't know, social media people. The top secret Super is 2,700. What is it? Is that the name of the shop that does it, or is there something secret about it? Would an RHP 1200 be a good turbo for a 6.2 Gen 5? Yeah, are you gonna be able to get enough fuel to it? I'm dying from slow. 96 Brighton Coupe. I don't know what that is. 1.8 of a top mount intercooler. Can weld in a turbo. If you have a top mount intercooler, wouldn't you already have a turbo? Oh, it's a shop is the name of it? Yeah, 2,700 is a lot. So what motor is in that thing? I have both cam and spring trucks you have. Very cool. Leads me to my next point. That 379 cam and springs are at 320 with the sale. After gaskets, machine work, and cam, I have a Roddy 448 for under 700. Yeah, it's a good. These are good prices. We're going to see a low buck truck cam for a small buck Chevy and a Gen 3. Doubt you'll ever see one for a small buck Chevy, but maybe for a Gen 3 Hemi. We're looking into stuff. Oh, the Subaru. Okay. Saw a 4-digit horsepower 4-wheel drive F-150 crash last night. That's not good. Clean truck, gets great parts. FFRE long block, built 10-speed, twin 6466s. Lack of track time and experience. Too much power, 24 pounds. Yeah, that sounds like it would be. Is it a Coyote thing? 2JZ, okay. Yeah, 2,700 is a lot. So it's a 2JZ block then, right? And maybe a 2JZ head, right? Are they doing? Is anybody doing billet 2JZ heads or billet 2JZ blocks? I would be surprised if they're. I remember seeing online that Temu or one of those guys is doing. Somebody bought some. One of the influencers bought a supposed to be a crate 2JZ, and they tore it apart, and it was it's not really what they expected. Tire builds on YouTube. Dyno runs very well. That's cool. That's a lot of power. It's amazing what guys are doing. Is it a compound turbo deal, I would imagine? What cam would you recommend for a daily driver? 04 S10 Blazer, 4-wheel drive, LQ9, rec port heads, and intake. What transmission is in that DBS? I'm leaning toward a Truck Plus. For all 65. And does it have a stock converter in it? An aluminum 6-liter. What would be a good setup? Be pulling a camper 30 feet long, want the best torque and horsepower, have a set of heads for the cheapest possible. Richard, on your 6-liter on your camper, what transmission do you have on that? And what gear do you have on that? I'm still leaning toward a Lobot truck cam for that on a 6-liter. Cheapest turbo LS headers on the market at the moment. I don't know. The cheapest ones probably are the ones that come on the motor from the wrecking yard. A lot of guys use the factory ones, the factory truck manifolds, if they'll fit. There's no reason you can't use that kind of manifold on there. I mean, you could easily go into 4-digit power levels with stock exhaust manifolds. Top fuel style rail drag cars now with 2 JZs. I remember seeing some of that. I remember seeing guys run because they make enough power that if you put it in something that's ultra light, then guys were saying, "Oh, look, I have the fastest 2 JZ in the world," or whatever. It's in a dragster. It's not a Supra. 3800 the world, like a 3800 V6 one. 480 gear, don't know. Okay, yeah, I'm still thinking the Lobot truck cam for that. Richard, on your 6-liter. We have video up of putting that cam in a 6-liter. It wasn't an aluminum one, but that's not going to matter. We did it in an iron one, I think an LQ4. And you could see the gain. It's like, 60 horsepower or something. It's quite a bit. It's a sizable gain. And then we put a Trailblazer SS on too, and that helps. That mostly helps at the top though, and it would not be something that I would pick for towing. Although, like we've had this discussion before about towing, when you are going up a grade, you don't mat it and keep it in overdrive with the converter locked up. You're not running that low of an RPM. It drops down at least 1 gear. It comes out of lockup, drops down a gear, and then all of a sudden you're at 3,000 or 3,500 or whatever. Thoughts on the rear steam ports being plugged from the factory on LS3? Curious if it's a non-issue, especially on the mild cams. I wouldn't worry about it for anything that I'm driving on the street. We don't ever run 4-hole steam ports on anything that we run. We run everything pretty cold, so that's not really a problem on the dyno. Could I run a truck plus cam and a stock 4.8 and still run this cam later down the road if I want to boost it or put series power? You can run a truck plus and a 4.8. I wouldn't pick that cam for a stock 4.8. I would pick the smaller Lobot truck camshaft. And then when you want to run boost later on, you can run either one of those. Because a truck plus is going to be soft down low on a 4.8. That's not the cam I would pick. You can. It's going to run more RPM, and my dream car would be a McLaren F1, and mine would be twin turbo though. Would you rather have more power below the torque peak than above the torque peak? 5644. Still a little split there. I honestly don't even remember. Oh, I have seen those in person before. I think I've seen those at SEMA before, way back in the day. Maybe in like the Michelin booth or one of those. When you boosted the old Chevy inline 6, what amount of boost yielded a decent gain on the stock engine internals of a Chevy 230? Well, I would always start out at low boost until you have the tune right. But you could start out at like 5 pounds and then go up from there. What cam for an S10 Blazer with a 6-liter stock converter, a low buck truck camshaft? 22 BRE, a 700 horsepower first gen WRX STI. Okay. Did you have a question about that? I like Subarus. My buddy Gary drove those in US Touring Car. The year after I won with the Del Sol, he would come out and drive with. He's a much better driver than I am. And then he brought a WRX out there and drove that and won the championship. And now he's won the championship several times, but not driving a WRX anymore. I think he was driving a Hyundai Genesis the last few years, but he's really, really good. But don't tell him I said that, though. He may actually be doing, he was talking about doing some, being an instructor, being a driving instructor, doing personal instruction, which if anybody wants to learn how to drive, I highly recommend time with instructors. They can, even when I was doing it, we can take you out to a day out on the track, even these high performance driving things and stuff. But if you get a guy that can ride with you and evaluate you and show you what's going on, and a lot of times they have guys there that can do that. So if they can, and it's free for you, definitely take advantage of that. But if you take a guy out like Gary, he will knock seconds off of your time. And you didn't have to buy a turbo kit. You didn't have to buy like soft compound tires or sway bars or coilovers or any of that stuff. He's just going to teach you how to drive. And it's a really, really good thing. Someone asked what kind of car you would want. Oh, that's what kind of car you'd want? How to make 600 plus horsepower with a 6-liter NA. Well, I have videos up when we did the intake test where we made about 600 horsepower. If you want to make more than that, higher static compression, camshaft, more RPM, that kind of stuff. This is some of the road knowledge we were looking for. To get 500 out of a 351, would I need a cam with more lift or duration or both over the 232? I think it's going to take a bigger camshaft than that. I think it's going to take something more like the what is the comp cam? I think it's going to take something more like that XFI cam. And that might not be the exact one that I would pick, but something like that is going to be where you want to be. Because we could get up near 500 with that on a 347. Drag race rollers. Okay, we don't care about that. 4 patterns, no. Hard pass on that. Extreme energy. Nitrous. Blower. XFI. So 236, 248, and 579 lift on a 114. You could even tighten that up a little bit, and I think it'd still get there. The next step up is pretty big. That's 248, 258. With that cam, we made more than 600, but it was on a 408. I'm swapping in a 4.8 in my 89 Toyota Cresta. Very nice. Had the swap for free, mating it to CDX XX Nissan 6-speed trans. Nice. Also have an LS6 cam. Is it worth putting the cam in? Yeah, it's if you have that, because then it's cheap. That cam is a lot better than the cam that came in the 4.8. It's going to be a little bit softer down low. You can take a look at the video that I did where we compared all of the factory cams. We did it on a 5.3, and you could see what the loss is down there. It's going to be a little bit more on a 4.8. But it's going to make a lot more power. It's going to make 30 or 40 horsepower more than that LR4 LM7 camshaft. What are my thoughts on ghost cams? I don't know what you mean by ghost cam. You'll just have to tell me what you mean by that. I don't know what your definition of that is. The Lowbuck truck camshaft has chop to it. It would be about the same as the truck cam, not as much or more. It has more than the Ripper cam. The Ripper cam is going to be softer down low than the low buck truck camshaft is. What's a good motor to use an LS7 cam? None of them. I mean, an LS7 cam makes a lot more peak power than like an LS7 cam makes a lot more peak power than an LM7 camshaft, like more than the truck cams do by a lot. But it's really, really soft down low. And because of that, most people don't want it in a 5.3. The low buck truck chops nicely. Good night. Niche. Lower speed and underspeed timing to give it a chop effect. Have timing bounce drastically at idle. It's a silly thing people do. Oh, that's what the ghost cam is? So that's a tune thing then? Yeah, I don't like the popping and banging stuff. In fact, I had to laugh. Lisa and I were walking the dogs, and we were walking, and one of these cars drove by that's doing that. I'm like, that's a crackle tune. And she's like, what is that? I said, well, they tune their car so that it does that. It makes that noise. She said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I said, but they do it to get chicks. She said, yeah, that's not going to work. It was funny. Was watching a stock cam series in the 5.3. I guess it'd be all right with a GM blue cam spring. Yeah, the LS3 spring or LS6 cam spring, any of those springs are all good for any of the factory cams. Let's not forget to hit the like button. That's true. You got to hit that like button, yo. I posted something on social media about carburetors. It's so funny how the EFI guys are so easily triggered. Yeah, it was I mean, I you know, when you see cars race and stuff, and they have these you can hear them be rich on the overrun, but any more tuning is you don't need to do that. And if you're just using it to try to draw attention to yourself, it's just not. I don't know. It's just not my thing. It's tune thing rather than pull degrees for idle overspeed. It will pull 15 degrees and it'll sense an overspeed and add 20 degrees. Oh, so it will cycle and hunt. That's awful. And that's how we cure that when you're like when I'm tuning a Holly and the thing doesn't want to idle, and it's jumping back and forth between a whole bunch of different cells, and they have different timing values in them. If you make all of them 20 degrees or whatever, it's like, look at that. It's like, oh, perfect. It's not hunting around anymore. It's not doing all that stuff. It likes that. Nothing worse than stance. Makes my ankles hurt just seeing it. Yeah, and the truck stuff is like that too. I don't like I don't like seeing a car. I understand for a car show or whatever, and if you want to have it sit there and look like that, I understand that. So it looks cool. It's like having a low rider all the way down to the ground. It's not practical because you can't drive like that. But the guys drive it like that with 15 degrees of negative camber or whatever. I'm like, that's just terrible. You're just going to wear out the inside edge. And then the trucks are like that too, with the big drop in the back and it's way up in the front. I'm like, that's not what I use a truck for. That's not my thing. I mean, if you're going to lift it all. If you're going to lower it all. Both those are good. Just make up your mind. I've seen some funny YouTube things about that. About there's a country dad that I follow, and he's always yelling at his kid, who's him also. He's always yelling at him, teaching him about how to be a real country person. And then one of the things is he brings a truck like that, and then he tells him that he wants a cyber truck. He's like just losing his mind. At least they're not doing the whistles at the end of the exhaust anymore. Yeah. That's okay. I don't mind that. The lowrider scene was big on that, not with whistles, but with um kind of putting clamps down, a flattened kind of exit and making small pipe stuff so that it burbled a little bit. Harder to do that kind of crackle tune thing on a carbureted application, but on fuel injected stuff you could do that. I like when they shoot flames though. If you could put have it be rich and have a spark plug in there or whatever, or even squirt fuel out. Like I like that. Anytime you're shooting flames, that's great. But the other stuff, I don't know. That's not my thing. Do you recommend anything other than springs for the L6 cam with the 4.8? You're probably going to have to go up in injector size. That cam might add enough to where the stock injector is not going to be enough on a 4.8. I think. 79 Malibu Power Glide, TV 9-inch, 5-liter gear, 5.0 gear, 5,000 stall. What engine combo would you use it in? I have everything from a 4.8 to a 6.2. Well, are you trying to drag race it? And are you sure you want a 5,000 stall and a 5.0 gear? That seems like you're going to want it to be like an 8,000 RPM motor. That becomes an expensive build. And then if you want it to be you want to have that gear and that kind of stall, and it's an 8,000 RPM motor, I don't know that I would pick a Power Glide. I think I would pick something with more gears in it. Put cards in your spokes. Yeah, I did that back in the day. Squatted trucks are a plague on Gulf Coast. Yeah. When we did cards in our spokes back in the day, we also mounted a stick on our handlebars because we had the card noise be the machine gun. So it was like we were doing Rat Patrol. That's what we were playing. I've also want injector injector to close the hood. Okay, that's good. You do want the lower hoods are. I'm obviously not having some stick out of the hood's good. It's both good and bad. It's cool when you're driving around. You have a high ram or a 671 or whatever, any 2 turbos, whatever you have sticking out of the hood's cool. But when you don't have a stick out of the hood and you have a hood, then you could drive around. That's also good. 1/8 mile drag car. Okay. What's the split for an 1/8 mile with a Power Glide? What's the split in first and second gear? Can you change the gears in the Power Glide? I'm sure you can, right? So that you could get the thing to not be a 1/4 mile transmission and have it be I know some of that is the rear gear, but I don't know what the split is between those two on a drag race one. You can make the top of your map scale 15% rich, then have negative degrees of timing in the timing cell that a neutral rev hits and it will shoot nice flames. The being able to shoot flames also is a function of other things that are going on with your exhaust. So if you have cats and mufflers and a full exhaust, it gets harder to shoot flames. TV Tommy Ivo, yep. 1.82 to 1:1 on the Power Glides. Okay. .76 to 1:1. See, I'm thinking that if you're running the 1/8 and you look at the 1/8 mile and you look at the gears that you would run in the 1/8 mile on a Turbo 400 or a 4L80 or a 4L60 or some other kind of transmission, none of those are ever going to be 1:1. Now, obviously, you're helping that with a 5.0 gear, but I'd have to do the math and see where they come out because a 1.82 to 1:1 is not a really big split. But I'm worried about launching the thing at a 1.82 gear to start out with. Would flex fuel injectors be enough for the Truck Plus cam? Yes. Full length header, Trailblazer SS. Yeah, those are 50s normally. Some of the flex fuels are 50s. That's more than enough. Do you think that the LS1 injector are enough for an LS6 cam in a 4.8? What I've read, they're not that great. I'd have to look and see. I don't remember off the top of my head what the flow rate is of an LS1 injector relative to an LR4 injector. I don't know what the difference is. Do you prefer draw through or blow through turbos in blown applications? Well, if you have a 871 or a 671, it's definitely going to be a draw through. It's not going to be a blow through. If you're going to do a Pro Charger or a VORTECH or that kind of thing, it's going to be a blow through. It almost has to be. Not very many of those are set up to draw fuel into them. What's the difference in springs that come with the Truck Plus cam and the BTR spring sold separately? I know that we have dual springs that we sell separately for the Truck Plus. And I don't know if we have in stock right now the springs that come with the kit to be available to sell separately. LS1 is 28 pounds, should be plenty on a 4.8. Okay, 28 should be enough, yeah. So 30 times 16 is 480. Yeah, that should be enough. It's going to be less than that. It should be 450. Yeah, I don't think you're going to get there. That should be fine. For the poll question, I think there's different levels of range. For instance, 454 that makes more torque than the horsepower, 6 liters that make equal, or 2 liter that redlines at 7,500 and makes more horsepower. Sure, except that there are very, very few 2-liter Nissan engines that run to 7,500. First of all, at least factory ones. And even still, the question is horsepower and torque. So do you still want more power below that, or do you want the power from the torque peak and up, or the torque peak and down? Which one of those do you want? I don't know that those things will change that. I want to use an M90 on my 6-cylinder. Okay. The only reason to go power glide is for high horsepower setups. Go turbo 400. I kind of am leaning more toward that myself. Like I said, I don't know the ins and outs of power glides. It just seems that a 182 first gear, which is essentially what you're doing, is not a good choice. My 6-liter with that low buck truck cam, what size injectors would you recommend? If you're always going to be NA, you should go with our 50s. If it's eventually going to be boosted, then just go with our 1000s. What's the most budget-friendly spring that will handle a sloppy stage 2 cam? I don't know. Matt or one of those guys might have some packs or something that might work, but that's a 585 lift cam. And depending on what motor it is, it's a 228 at 50. So it's going to want to rev also, like particularly out of 4.8. The car came with it, paid $3,000, couldn't buy the parts for less than that. Yeah, no, I agree. Then I would, if you were going to do that and you have that gear, then I would pick the biggest motor that you can, the one that makes the most torque. 916. An LS6 spring is not going to work with a sloppy stage 2 cam. You won't have coil bind clearance for that. We know that we've gone through these springs. Sloppy stage 2 is a higher PM cam. I thought I'd seen it level off and start falling off at 66 to 6,700 on a 4.8. I don't remember. I know when Matt did one, because some guys like to put high rams and sloppy stage 2s and turbos on 4.8s, and that's a really high RPM motor. Came with a complete Holley Terminator kit too, so slap my 416 into it and the L6 block and run that. There you go. Ran a power glide because I ran 26-inch tall tires and needed to calm the hit to keep it happy. That was that 700 horsepower. Yeah, I mean, you could, like I said, you might be able to work around that. My brain just doesn't want to go with something that's that tall of a gear. It's like launching in second or third gear or whatever. But I can have a free takeoff Mustang 5-liter injectors from a friend working at the dealer. He's the guy installing. I don't know what size injector that is. Are you talking about a 5-liter Coyote? I don't know what a stock Coyote injector is. You need something that's a 40 or 50 or above. I'm not that savvy with the Coyote stuff. Not that hip. 5446. More power below peak torque. Obviously, having all of it is better, but a lot of times you can't do that. And we got one more minute. One more minute to go. Remember, go check out Richard Older Performance. And when you order something, make sure you give Jimmy a hard time. What's the benefit of buying the VTR springs over just using the springs in the kit? If you're buying the cam and the springs together, just use those. But right now, you might not be able to buy the springs by themselves. The only ones that we have in stock right now that are not part of the cam and spring kit, because that's the only way that we're releasing them, because we haven't got the rest of them in yet, I think is the problem. The dual springs obviously will have more spring rate than the single spring does, than the spring that comes with the kit. My F2 ProCharge 427 just keeps building power and torque. Yeah, a centrifugal blower adds boost and power with RPM. And then depending on how big the blower is, what your pulley size is, and then what the configuration is, like what intake manifold you have, what camshaft you have, eventually it will you'll run into a point where the motor now, even though you're continuing to add more airflow with the blower, that the power will level off and then start going down. It can also happen with the blower at whatever pulley ratio you have, that the airflow of the blower, even with more engine speed, is just not going to support that anymore. All turbos are back in stock. Yes. I think we have T4 and V-band G42s. We have mirror image stuff. Remember, more spring requires more seat cushions. The dual springs come with different spring seats, if that's what you're talking about. Yeah, any aluminum head is going to have a spring cup, or in the case of the LS, the thing that acts as the spring cup or the protector for the aluminum head is the factory seal, because the seal also expands out, and that's where the spring rests and locates. What turbo for a 416 in Malibu? I'm assuming you're going to want to make power, so almost definitely would go with the G42, because that's the 1,000+ horsepower turbo. And for a 416, it's going to be really, really, really responsive. When we've driven around with a stock and a mild 5.3 in the Tahoe with that G42, and it's fine. It works great in that, even in that. So in a 416, it's going to be crazy. And you're going to be able to make lots of power. Right now, I think Jimmy's driving around with the GTX 3584 and the Truck Plus cam, but we need to put another transmission in it because the 4L60 is not happy anymore. It's got, I think, 200,000 or 300,000 miles on it, so it's time. And it's made a lot of dyno pulls, and some of them at more than 600 at the tires. So it's it's saying, hey, look, I think I'm good. But on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. And I don't know if I'll be back tomorrow or not. We'll see. Got some stuff.